today. This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Bret Baier in Washington. We have several major breaking stories at this hour. Senator Al Franken, a Democrat from Minnesota, under fire tonight, accused of sexually harassing and groping one female media personality, and today she's speaking out. A defiant Republican Roy Moore is staying in the race for the Alabama Senate seat, while President Trump and his White House are not yet calling for Moore to quit that race. House Republicans have passed their version of tax reform. The fate of the Senate bill still up in the air, and New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez gets a hung jury in his federal corruption trial. So what's next? We have Fox team coverage of all those stories. Mike Emanuel on Capitol Hill with the big GOP win on tax reform in the House. Jonathan Seri in Alabama with the latest on the sexual misconduct allegations against Senate candidate Roy Moore, and brand new Fox polls tonight. James Rosen at the White House with what President Trump is or is not saying about the situation. But we begin with correspondent Doug McKelway and the breaking news on Minnesota Democratic Senator Al Franken. Good evening, Doug.
Evening, Brett. This latest allegation against Minnesota Democratic Senator Al Franken is unique because for the first time there is photographic evidence. And as the flurry of allegations expands, it's proving that men in neither party are immune. The picture is worth 1,000 words and many calls for a Senate ethics investigation. It was snapped on Christmas Eve 2006 on an Air Force C-17 returning home from a USO tour in Afghanistan. The sleeping woman is former swimsuit model and now ABC radio news anchor Leanne Tweeden, the alleged groper, then comedian Al Franken.
And I'm asleep, literally on the plane, and there's a picture of Al Franken sort of doing this, grabbing my boobs, over my flak vest.
Adding to Tweeden's outrage, earlier in the USO tour, Franken wrote a comedy skit for the two with a scripted kiss. She claims Franken tried relentlessly to rehearse it. She gave in.
It happened so fast, and he just mashed his lips against my face, and he stuck his tongue in my mouth so fast.
In a written statement today, Franken apologized, quote, "I certainly don't remember the rehearsal for the skit in the same way, but I send my sincerest apologies to Leanne. As to the photo, it was clearly intended to be funny, but wasn't. I shouldn't have done it." Tweeden accepted the apology and does not want him to step down. Numerous congresspeople are joining Franken's voluntary call for an ethics investigation.
I do support that there should be an ethics investigation, and we'll see where that ends up.
More members of Congress may be outed, fueled by stories like this of a young female staffer sent to deliver documents to a congressman's home.
At that point, he decided to expose himself. She left, and then she quit her job.
Some critics maintain that inappropriate behavior will continue as long as alleged perpetrators enjoy anonymity.
In the last 20 years, there have been 260 settlements at a cost to the taxpayers of this country of $15 million. Today, we are here to change that.
Speer's Me Too Congress bill would end mediation that requires parties to keep the findings confidential. That, while Speaker Paul Ryan is also mandating sexual harassment training for all members of Congress. Franken has been one of Congress's most vocal critics of sexual assault in the military. And just yesterday, he criticized one of President Trump's judicial nominees, whom he accused of being unfair to a transgendered baseball player. Brett?
Doug, thank you. More on this with the panel. Brand new Fox polls show Judge Roy Moore may be in trouble in that Senate race in Alabama following the sexual harassment accusations against him. The Republican Senate candidate is down 8 percentage points to Democrat Doug Jones in our latest poll out tonight. Senate Republicans are said to be looking at options for keeping the nominee from running for the seat. Correspondent Jonathan Seri has the latest on the allegations against Roy Moore and the political fallout from Birmingham.
This is an effort by Mitch McConnell and his cronies to steal this election.
Republican Roy Moore continues his bid for Senate, despite calls from his national party to step aside. On Twitter, a defiant Moore writes, "Dear Mitch McConnell, bring it on." Politico reports the Senate Majority Leader has been exploring the legal feasibility of triggering a completely new special election by asking current Senator Luther Strange to resign. But Alabama Secretary of State John Merrill says the plan wouldn't work.
At this time, Governor Ivey will not call a special election to interrupt the system that is already ongoing. We've already had a primary. We've already had a runoff.
The fact that national GOP leaders would even consider such drastic measures shows their divide with Republicans in Alabama, as allegations of sexual harassment continue to mount, including a Gadsden woman who tells AL.com Moore groped her buttocks while leaving his law office in 1991. He didn't pinch it, he grabbed it, Tina Johnson says in the article. Moore continues to deny any sexual impropriety.
Love Roy Moore, DA.
Earlier this week, Gloria Allred pointed to a yearbook signature as evidence of contact between Moore and accuser Beverly Young Nelson. But a lawyer for the Moore campaign questions the authenticity of the signature and says DA were actually the initials of Moore's assistant, which appeared on a signature stamp on Nelson's 1999 divorce decree.
Release the yearbook so that we can determine, is it genuine or is it a fraud?
In an open letter to Sean Hannity, Moore says, I adamantly deny the allegations of Lee Korfman and Beverly Nelson, did not date underage girls, and have taken steps to begin a civil action for defamation. Meanwhile, Democrat Doug Jones is trying to keep a distance from all the controversy surrounding his opponent.
We're staying in our lane. We're focusing on our issues. It's a problem that he's going to have to deal with.
A Fox News poll of likely Alabama voters shows 38% believe the allegations against Roy Moore are true. 37% do not. 25% unsure. Regardless of whether they believe the allegations, 54% of all voters and 75% of Republicans in the state believe Moore should stay in the race. And this afternoon, the Moore campaign abruptly ended a news conference in this hotel ballroom when reporters began asking questions about the allegations against the candidate. Meanwhile, the Alabama GOP Steering Committee has issued a statement affirming their support of Moore as the party's nominee. In that statement, State Party Chairman Terry Lathan says Alabamians will be the ultimate jury in this election, not the media or those from afar. Brett?
Amazing story. We'll continue to follow it. Jonathan, thank you. President Trump is basically punting on the question of what he thinks of the Roy Moore case, at least so far. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen was at today's briefing at the White House.
On his way into a Capitol Hill confab on tax reform, and on his way out, President Trump ignored reporters' questions about embattled Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore, now accused by 9 women of sexual misconduct in varying forms and degrees, and refusing amid his vigorous denials in all of those cases to end his campaign. The White House press secretary stopped short of calling on Moore to quit.
The president believes that these allegations are very troubling and should be taken seriously, and he thinks that the people of Alabama should make the decision on who their next senator should be.
Traveling to Hanoi last week, the president told reporters, I'm dealing with the president of China, the president of Russia. I'm dealing with the folks over here. I haven't been able to devote very much time to it. The president's daughter and senior advisor, Ivanka Trump, minced no words, telling the Associated Press Wednesday, there's a special place in hell for people who prey on children. I've yet to see a valid explanation, and I have no reason to doubt the victims' accounts.
The incontrovertible principle is that there's no Senate seat that's worth more than a child, and we all want to put that forward.
Asked why the president finds the allegations against Judge Moore troubling on their face, when then-candidate Trump dismissed sexual misconduct allegations made against him by various women during the 2016 campaign as lies and urged voters to view them that way, Sanders indicated that Mr. Trump was just speaking from personal knowledge at the time.
I think the president has certainly a lot more insight into what he personally did or didn't do, and he spoke out about that directly during the campaign.
Someone who has stood in Sanders' spot said she and the White House faced a quote-unquote double-barreled catch-22 and took the only viable path.
If he said Moore should step down, everybody would say to him, well, what about the women who accused you? Why aren't they believable? And if he doesn't say Moore should step down, people will say, why aren't you saying Moore should step down?
While Sarah Sanders did not go as far as some other women who work in the Trump White House and who appear to condemn Judge Moore, the press secretary nonetheless signaled that the candidate has no friend in the Oval Office. Specifically, Sanders noted that the president supported this week's decision by the Republican National Committee to withdraw resources from the Alabama race. Brett?
James Rosen on a windy North Lawn. James, thank you. So what do you think? Do you think President Trump should say one way or the other what he thinks about the Roy Moore case? Let me know on Twitter at Bret Baier. You can use the hashtag Special Report, or on Facebook at facebook.com/BretBaierSR. The ball is now in the Senate's court on tax reform. The House passed its version this afternoon, the first major hurdle, a 9-vote cushion there. But there are serious questions about that Senate bill and whether they can come together. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel has the story from Capitol Hill.
Enough giving in. Let's start to reclaim our future right here, in this moment, in this chamber, in this moment. Let's pass this bill.
A passionate appeal from Speaker Paul Ryan, who has worked on tax reform his entire career.
The bill is passed.
House lawmakers passed Tax Reform 227 to 205. It passed the House after a pep talk from President Trump.
Tax is going really well. Thank you very much.
Democrats see an ulterior motive for the president's exuberance.
You can certainly understand why he's coming to the Capitol today, just to say thank you. Thank you for the $1 billion plus that is estimated to go to the Trump family under this bill.
192 Democrats voted against the tax plan. 13 Republicans voted no, almost all from high-tax states, California, New Jersey, and New York.
I cannot allow the people of New York and the people of my district to become collateral damage in a federal tax reform bill.
President Trump congratulated House lawmakers on Twitter, calling it, quote, a big step toward fulfilling our promise. But there's no guarantee of getting there by the new year.
We've got a long road ahead of us. We have the Senate right now working on doing this. We're excited about going through the legislative process, going to conference, getting this done, making this bill even better.
One challenge is already Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson says he's a no because he believes the tax package would favor corporations over other businesses.
I was asked, can you support the current Senate version? I wouldn't vote for it. It just sounds simple, but doesn't mean I don't want to, vote for a real solution.
Maine Senator Susan Collins has expressed concerns about GOP leaders mixing scrapping the Obamacare individual mandate as part of tax reform. Retiring Senators Bob Corker of Tennessee and Jeff Flake of Arizona have said they're worried about the impact on the nation's debt. And Arizona Senator John McCain surprised everyone by being the vote to kill, repeal, and replace of Obamacare this summer.
Passing tax reform is the single most important thing we can do right now to support those left behind by the Obama economy.
Most Republican sources believe Senator Johnson can get to yes, but there is very little wiggle room or margin for error in a 52-48 Senate. Brett?
Mike Emanuel, live on the Hill. Mike, thanks. That Senate math coming into play again today. New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez says he will never forget the people who went after him during his federal corruption investigation and trial. That trial ended today with a hung jury. Correspondent David Lee Miller is in Newark tonight.
Supporters cheered as New Jersey Democratic Senator Robert Menendez exited federal court in Newark. Minutes earlier, a judge declared a mistrial in a case that has dragged on for 11 weeks and that could have sent the senator to prison for decades if convicted of 12 criminal charges, including bribery, conspiracy, and making false statements on his Senate financial disclosure form.
Today is Resurrection Day.
Judge William Walls declared a mistrial after members of the jury sent him a note that said they could not reach a unanimous decision on any of the charges.
The way this case started was wrong. The way it was investigated was wrong. The way it was prosecuted was wrong.
Prosecutors alleged that Menendez did political favors for his longtime friend, Florida eye doctor Dr. Salomon Melgen, and in return, Melgen provided the senator with free luxury travel and more than $750,000 in contributions that benefited his run for re-election. The defense said it was not a case of bribery, but one friend doing favors for another. After 30 hours of deliberations, the jury was split 10-2 in favor of acquittal. Most jurors said the prosecution failed to make its case.
It was a victimless crime, I think, and it was a crime where it was an email trial. And I just didn't see the smoking gun.
Menendez broke down in tears, thanking his family for standing by him during the ordeal. But he also cautioned those who did not support him.
To those who were digging my political grave so that they could jump into my seat, I know who you are, and I won't forget you.
Senator Menendez's legal problems might not be over. The Justice Department has not decided if it's going to retry the case. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, meanwhile, is calling on the Senate Ethics Committee
to investigate Menendez's actions, resulting in his indictment. Brett?
David Lee Miller in Newark. David Lee, thanks. Let's get some insight on the Menendez story and this trial. Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano is with us tonight. Judge, your thoughts on this hung jury?
Well, he faces a lot that's coming. The first is a decision by his former Senate colleague, Jeff Sessions, who's now the Attorney General, and it would actually go to that level as to whether they want to retry a sitting senator. They've spent several $1 million in the prosecution. They defended their case 3 times in the Federal Court of Appeals. It would be difficult for me to see them just dropping this hot potato right now. The second problem that Senator Menendez faces is a likely primary challenge in the New Jersey senatorial primary, which is just 7 months from now in June of 2018. And his principal opponent will be somebody who once held the seat that he now holds, former New Jersey Senator Robert Torricelli. But I think the most troubling thing for him is the Senate ethics investigation, because the Senate Ethics Committee can look at allegations against Senator Menendez, which Judge Walz, the judge in the case, would not let the jury hear. And some of those are very lurid and are in the area of sexual activity with underage females.
Let me read Senator McConnell's statement, the majority leader. Senator Menendez was indicted on numerous federal felonies. His trial shed light on serious accusations of violating the public's trust as an elected official, as well as potential violations of the Senate's Code of Conduct. Because of the seriousness of these charges, I am calling on the Senate Ethics Committee to immediately investigate Senator Menendez's actions, which led to his indictment. So there's where you say the trouble is.
Yes, and ordinarily the Senate Ethics Committee, or either ethics committee in either house, will not do anything while a criminal prosecution is going on. I don't think they're going to wait. They pretty much indicated they're going to start looking at it. They're not going to wait for a second trial or even a decision about whether or not there will be a second trial. They're going to begin that investigation, which will be a form of prosecution, probably right after Christmas.
But as it stands in the law tonight, Menendez is innocent in the law.
He is absolutely innocent. It's the reason, I think, for his jubilation. The government has to decide: do they want to spend this money and divert these resources, or do they have other things to do?
You said before that this judge kind of ran an unorthodox courtroom.
He did. He stopped at 3:30 in the afternoon. We usually try cases until 5 or 5:30, and he didn't sit on Fridays. That resulted in the exclusion of this juror who had a vacation, which resulted in the juror giving a press conference, unprecedented.
While it's still going on.
For us to learn what's going on in the jury room while it's going on, and for the jurors to hear what their former juror colleague said about them and to be tempted to respond and react to it. That is almost a recipe for a mistrial in itself. Now moot, because the mistrial was declared for other reasons.
But it was a tough case for the government anyway, wasn't it, after the U.S. Supreme Court decision on the McDonnell case, which is the Virginia governor?
Yes. Bob McDonnell was convicted. The conviction was upheld by the appeals court, and the Supreme Court unanimously reversed it and said the way the bribery statute is written, you cannot prosecute somebody who receives favors from political friends for doing their job that they would be doing anyway. There really has to be a quid pro quo. You want me to do this, you will pay me. Not, I'm going to do my job and you can pay for my daughter's wedding. So without that quid pro quo, that actual agreement of this for that, there's no bribery. Judge Walz felt that did not apply here, and he allowed the entire case to go to the jury. Most of us who watch these things felt he should have thrown most of it out under McDonnell, but he didn't. There's a motion before him next week to do that nevertheless. That, if granted, would result in an acquittal, not a hung jury.
I want to play one soundbite from Senator Menendez talking about this process.
I've also learned about the incredible weight and power of the federal government and how it can crush you if it wants to. What office or department of the federal government gives me back the past 2.5 years of my life? Where do I go to have the damage they sought to incur to my reputation? Where is it? What department is it that replaces it?
It's interesting to hear him go through that and get emotional at times.
It is. These are very profound questions that he asked that will resonate with anybody who has any relationship to the criminal justice system, not just in New Jersey and not just the federal government. This happens all the time. And he's right. They damaged him in ways that could never be repaired, even by an acquittal.
Judge, as always, thank you.
Oh, pleasure, Brett.
ISIS threatens the Pope as the holiday season approaches. That is next. A suicide bomber killed 14 people today at a political gathering in Kabul, Afghanistan. ISIS is claiming responsibility. Authorities on the ground say another 18 people were wounded. Meantime, ISIS is threatening to go after Pope Francis just weeks before tens of thousands of faithful gather at the Vatican to celebrate Christmas. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott shows us the latest warning from the terror group.
The Vatican in the terrorist crosshairs. An image circulating on an ISIS-related website showing a car headed towards St. Peter's, a masked jihadi at the wheel, an assault weapon at his side. The headline, Christmas blood, so wait. Just a visual threat, but this is not the first time terrorists have singled out this symbol of Christianity for their attention. In August, Pope Francis was the target of another ISIS video, a man seen ripping up a picture of the pontiff.
It shouldn't be overly surprising that they are continuing to propagate the idea of attacking Christian religious symbols in the West, the Vatican being, of course, a very prominent one.
Actual plots against the Vatican have been disrupted in the past. In 2015, 9 were arrested, suspected of planning a Vatican attack. Another ISIS-linked scheme broken up in 2016. The head of the Swiss Guards, charged with defending the Vatican, recently warned it was a matter of time before such an attack occurred, but that he and his guards were ready. With ISIS losing in Syria and Iraq, foreign fighters, including Italians, could be heading home. And vehicle-borne attacks are the new norm. Last December saw another attacker use a truck to ram a Christmas market in Berlin, killing 12. Those kinds of attacks multiplying, officials are not taking any chances.
We certainly believe that they're aware of this threat and can only suppose that they're taking appropriate action.
For example, the avenue leading up to St. Peter's is now closed to traffic to cut down on terrorist chances. Still, with a pope who mingles with the people, the risk of another kind of attack remains. A Vatican spokesman had no comment to us on the specific new threat, but with the Christmas season soon upon us, it is certain they will be vigilant. Brett.
Greg Palcott in London. Greg, thank you. Up next, more questions from the Senate for President Trump's son-in-law. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 5 in Las Vegas with new lawsuits relating to the massacre outside a hotel and casino last month. Stephen Paddock killed 58 people and injured hundreds more, according to authorities. 14 civil complaints were filed Wednesday. At least 3 other lawsuits have been brought since October 1st. Next week, Special Report will take you back to Las Vegas to try to get answers about that investigation. Fox 10 in Phoenix, as guards at Lewis Prison in Buckeye, Arizona, recover a crashed drone that was meant to deliver drugs and cell phones to inmates. The drone was found inside the prison fence, but outside the prison yard. It's believed to be the first such attempt in Arizona, but at least a dozen others since such schemes have been reported in the last 5 years. And this is a live look at Dallas, a foggy, rainy Dallas from Fox 4, our affiliate there. The big story there tonight, the NFL condemning actions by Cowboys owner Jerry Jones as detrimental to the league's best interests. That could open the door to fining Jones or even trying to strip him of the Dallas Cowboys. Jones has been trying to delay or stop contract extension negotiations with Commissioner Roger Goodell. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. A newspaper in Zimbabwe is showing pictures of President Robert Mugabe meeting with the army commander who has placed him under house arrest. The 93-year-old Mugabe is being urged by world leaders and many of his own citizens to resign. The army stepped in after Mugabe fired his deputy and appeared to be positioning First Lady Grace Mugabe as a presidential successor. Back here at home, senators want more answers tonight from President Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is here with details. Good evening, Catherine.
Thank you, Brett. The senior Republican and ranking Democrat on the powerful Senate Judiciary Committee are calling on Jared Kushner, a senior White House advisor and the president's son-in-law, to provide more records to Congress. Writing to Kushner's attorney, Republican Chairman Chuck Grassley and Democrat Dianne Feinstein said they appreciate Kushner's voluntary cooperation, but the records they said first requested last month are incomplete. The committee wants all email traffic between Kushner and then National Security Advisor Mike Flynn from the day after the election to the present. The committee is requesting a broad search of Kushner's emails to include 26 key words such as Clinton, WikiLeaks, hacking, Putin, and Turkey. The last search term reflects Flynn's unregistered work on behalf of a foreign government. Flynn has since filed with the Justice Department. The Senate panel said existing records show Kushner was copied on email traffic in September 2016 discussing WikiLeaks. And Kushner then forwarded the email to another campaign official, but those emails were not provided to the committee. In July, Kushner testified on Capitol Hill behind closed doors. That transcript was not shared with Senate Judiciary members, who warned in today's letter they may require their own interview. After his July testimony, Kushner addressed the allegations.
Let me be very clear. I did not collude with Russia, nor do I know of anyone else in the campaign who did so.
White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said Kushner's attorney will be issuing a statement at some point today. Separately, a source close to the legal team said the public release of the letter was unnecessary and not an act of good faith by the committee, Brett.
Kevin, thank you.
You're welcome.
A Gulf War veteran who set himself on fire outside a New Jersey veterans clinic went nearly a year without a mental health appointment or medication. That's the finding of an Inspector General's report. In 2015, Charles Ingram III requested an appointment and was given one for 3 months later. In March of 2016, he killed himself. The report says the clinic did not provide appropriate supervision and oversight in the 11 months before Ingram's death. Stocks were up today. The Dow gained 187. The S&P 500 finished ahead 21. The Nasdaq surged 87 points. Add Senator Al Franken's name to the list of people now accused of sexual impropriety. We'll get reaction from the panel when we come back.
I said, you know what? I have to speak out now. This is my time. I'm going to come out with the story because I don't want this to happen to anybody else. And if I can come out now and tell my story, and if he's done this to somebody else, maybe somebody else will have the courage to come out in real time and not hold this in for 10 years and have the anger and the humiliation and the shame that I had for 10 years and not hide it. I'm done with it. I moved on with my life, but I'm coming out with it now so I can be done with it. And you know, maybe he can't get away with it anymore. Before I even knew it, he put his hand on the back of my head and came towards me and mashed his face against my mouth and stuck his tongue in my mouth. And, you know, I sort of pushed him back and I said, don't ever do that to me again.
Leanne Tweeden telling her story about a USO trip with then comedian Al Franken, now Senator Al Franken from Minnesota. They were on this trip, and she tells the story about what she says was the harassment and groping behind stage. And then there is this picture from the C-17 where she is asleep, and you can see Al Franken making that motion. She comes out with this today, and the initial statement from Franken says, I certainly don't remember the rehearsal for the skit when this kiss happened in the same way, but I send my sincerest apologies to Leanne. As to the photo, it was clearly intended to be funny, but wasn't. I shouldn't have done it. That's how the day started. There were a couple of other statements throughout the day and a lot of reaction on Capitol Hill. Let's bring in our panel. Byron York, Chief Political Correspondent of the Washington Examiner. A.B. Stoddard, Associate Editor at Real Clear Politics and host of No Labels Radio on Sirius XM. And Molly Hemingway, Senior Editor at The Federalist. Okay, A.B., your thoughts?
Well, I just feel like a lot of people do that this is the beginning of a big cascading event. I just don't believe that Senator Franken is the last lawmaker in the House or senator in the Senate to have done something like this. Women are coming together, trying to, in solidarity with each other, but also just to try to stop it from happening again. And it's going to really be very difficult time on Capitol Hill. This whole situation with comparing Senator Franken to Roy Moore, the candidate in the Alabama Senate race, is a little difficult. I think that you do see that the majority leader is trying to subject Senator Franken to an ethics committee investigation in order to sort of set a precedent so that if Moore were to win and come in, he would automatically be subjected for activities that took place before you were a senator to the same kind of ethics investigation. But where this ends, I don't know. You know, when someone apologizes and the victim accepts the apology, do you have ethics investigations? This is really a mess, and I think we're only at the beginning.
Yeah, and I should point out the next statement, Franken in the afternoon says that he is open to this ethics investigation and willing to cooperate, and he was more full-throated, if you will, in his apology to Tweeden. But it is something to watch, and you have a number of Democratic senators weighing in, saying how serious this is.
You've had people talking about Al Franken maybe having to resign over this. This has really thrown an incredible wild card into the sexual misconduct situation we've been in for the last few weeks in Washington, because up until now we were talking about Roy Moore, the Senate candidate in Alabama, and you were talking about a Republican leadership that was completely distancing himself from his candidacy, trying to starve his candidacy of money, and trying to in every way make sure that Roy Moore did not become the next senator from Alabama. Now it has become a bipartisan issue with a lot of Democrats running away from microphones today, and this whole Al Franken thing. And one thing about the Ethics Committee, we've talked about both cases ending up there. The Ethics Committee, the Senate, has never expelled a member for conduct before that member became a senator. It just hasn't happened before. And if these cases get to that, that would be a huge new precedent in the Senate.
Fox Research just put up some interesting stats, and that is December 2006, this incident happens that Tweeden describes on this USO trip. February 2007, Franken announced his candidacy for U.S. Senate. November 2008, Franken beats Norm Coleman by 225 votes. December 2009, Obamacare passes the Senate with a 60-vote filibuster-proof majority, which Franken was a part of. Just an interesting note there on history.
Yeah, perhaps that November 2008 was the most significant date because there were credible allegations that there were some problems with that election, and it was such a narrow victory for Al Franken. There's absolutely no question that by the standard that was recently set by the political and media establishment, that Al Franken should be expelled. I mean, they have been saying for days that conduct 40 years ago should lead to expulsion from the Senate. There's no question this is credible allegation. This is behavior that was just before he was a senator, and that's the standard that was being used for the last few days. But I do kind of wonder if maybe what should happen here is a little bit of everybody taking a deep breath, thinking through how to properly handle credible allegations of sexual assault and sexual impropriety, how to balance the allegations with the defense, and whether we should institute better systems for handling this. But it can't be done where if it's one party, the mob forms and the judgment is held immediately, and if it's another party, we get to distance it and have it go through the ethics committee, an ethics committee that does a very good job of not holding people accountable.
All right, let's turn to Roy Moore. He tweeted today, Al Franken admits guilt after photographic evidence of his abuse surfaces. Mitch, meaning Mitch McConnell, let's investigate. In Alabama, zero evidence, allegations 100% rejected. Mitch, Moore must quit immediately or be expelled. I think there's obviously a lot of pushback about the zero evidence. There are 9 women who are speaking out with specific stories. And while he's challenging them and moving on, AB, it's interesting to watch the two dynamics here.
I'm not going to defend Al Franken's conduct, but because he said he was sorry and admitted doing this, even though his initial statement wasn't really adequate and then he was more contrite later, and because his victim has accepted his apology and said it is sincere, it is not the same as Roy Moore. So he is denying these cases of the 4 women in the Washington Post, though in his interview with Sean Hannity, he seemed to equivocate and say, well, if I got her mom's permission, then it was okay, the 14-year-old. This is where it breaks down, and this is why President Trump doesn't want to weigh in on this. He doesn't want people asking about 16 people accusing him of harassment or groping or whatever it is.
Are you saying that Al Franken admitted to forcibly groping and tongue-kissing the victim?
Whatever.
Because I thought he only admitted to
a different memory.
I believe he said he had a different memory.
All I know is that she believes that he has offered his sincerest apology, that he shouldn't have taken the photograph. I agree. He tried to get out of the kissing part.
The thing for which there's photographic evidence he did admit. Yes.
I am not sticking up for what he did. I'm saying the situations aren't comparable simply because his victim is saying she has accepted a sincere apology. Right. This is different than the situation. I'm not talking about whether he should be expelled.
Specifically, here's what he said.
I'm talking about Roy Moore is defiantly, adamantly saying that these people are lying, and it's a different.
What Franken said on the specific statement. While I don't remember the rehearsal for the skit as Leanne does, I understand why we need to listen and to believe women's experiences. I'm asking that an ethics investigation be undertaken, and I will gladly cooperate. To your other point, let me play this: the president and Sarah Sanders today on the other point about President Trump.
It's totally fake news. It's just fake. It's fake. It's made up stuff, and it's disgraceful what happens. But that happens in the world of politics.
Is the official White House position that all of these women are lying?
Yeah, we've been clear on that from the beginning, and the president's spoken on it.
I wonder what you would assert to be the difference between the two situations, such that on the face of things, we should find one set of allegations very troubling, and on the other, we shouldn't pay attention to them at all, or we should totally disbelieve them.
The president has certainly a lot more insight into what he personally did or didn't do, and he spoke out about that directly during the campaign, and I don't have anything further to add beyond that.
Byron, there's one school of thought that's saying he doesn't want to get into this because of all of that. There's another school of thought that says he lost by supporting Luther Strange. And if you look at the polls down there about approval of President Trump, he is at, I think, 91%, 52% approve, 47% disapprove. But Mitch McConnell is down at 27%. Go to Fox Poll 3 if you could. Yeah. 27 approve, 57 disapprove. So the other school of thought is that he gets involved, tells Roy Moore to get out of the race. Roy Moore says, you know what, I'm staying in, and then wins. Yeah. And thereby loses again.
And look at what Roy Moore said today, both in his response on the Franken issue and in his speech in Birmingham. He's running against Mitch McConnell, and it's working pretty good for him because Mitch McConnell, among Republicans in Alabama, according to this new Fox poll, has an approval rating of 29%, and whereas Trump has an approval rating of 91% with them. So this is something that the president really, there's not a lot he could do. Possibly he could pressure the governor maybe to push toward changing an election date, but he can't make Roy Moore do anything. And there's not a lot for him to win in this situation. As far as his own past is concerned, the whole what about Trump thing has come up regularly since the Harvey Weinstein the news broke, and I would expect that you're going to see it keep coming up with every new case of someone who is accused.
But I will say, Molly, that traditionally a president has tried to lift up or taken the moral high ground and said, we need to be bigger as a nation or something, right?
Yes, and this is a delicate situation given the allegations against Donald Trump, too. But what really needs to happen here, I think, is care for the Alabama voter who is in a very bad situation there. People need to be thinking about them. But also, I think we really need to take some deep breaths and think through how to handle these allegations. You cannot have a situation where society forms mobs in response to allegations and executes punishment immediately. We should think about why we have good systems in place to handle these things in a little bit more judicious manner. And that's something that affects everybody across the political spectrum, but nobody seems interested in it because they're just trying to see how they can get political advantage.
Other big things happened today. The House passed tax reform. So now what? It's up to the Senate.
Tax is going really well. Thank you very much.
On this vote, the yeas are 227, the nays are 205. The bill is passed.
This country's waited 31 years for this day.
We've got a long road ahead of us, and we have a timeline to get this done by the end of the year. We have the Senate right now working on doing this.
Chairman, just very quickly to respond to... Wait. Now, look, we're not going to have a free-for-all here today. This is going to be run in a fair but responsible manner.
And we're looking forward to seeing the same results come out of the Senate when they pass a bill and signing historic tax cuts and tax reform.
Well, it did pass today. After all the back and forth in the House, 227 and 205, there were 13 Republicans who voted no, and you'll see the states that they're from, many of them from these big states dealing with state and local tax issues and the deduction battle back and forth. President Trump tweeting congratulations to the House of Representatives for passing the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, a big step forward fulfilling our promise to deliver historic tax cuts for the American people by the end of the year. Will that happen? Back with the panel. Byron.
A lot closer now than we were yesterday. This is big news. It's a real success for them, and done with a lot less drama than the Obamacare thing in the House, and a few more votes, 227. Virtual landslide compared to the Obamacare thing. So this is big, and I think in part it's because cutting taxes is just in the Republican wheelhouse, or it's in their DNA, or however you want to explain it. This is something that they like to do and they know how to do, and I think that bodes well for it going over to the Senate. There are clearly a lot of differences, not just on state and local taxes, but the big Obamacare individual mandate thing. But the sense of desperation I think that most Republicans feel about passing something, I think will get them over the line on this.
Maybe.
I think the Senate Republicans are going to have to come much closer to the House bill that passed today in order to have this become a reality, because the Senate bill is on very shaky ground. The individual mandate repeal sounds great as a pay for. It's $358 billion around there, but it's a really politically stupid pay for. You're going to lose potentially people like Susan Collins, Dean Heller, vulnerable Republicans, maybe Senator Capito from West Virginia, people who are concerned about what that would do to the individual exchanges in their states if you put in a repeal without a repair or replace.
Well, doesn't that also tie to Alexander Murray, that legislation that essentially shores up the insurance companies? Doesn't that also kind of a part of this in this plan to repeal the mandate?
The Democrats are not going to support Alexander Murray if I don't know that what's left of the Alexander Murray plan is going to help give a soft landing to the individual mandate repeal. If you look at polling, any further deterioration in the Obamacare exchanges will be blamed on the Republicans, and so you still have a math problem. Apart from there are deficit concerns. Obviously, Senator Johnson has small business concerns, but you have Senators Corker, possibly Flake, and Langford all having deficit concerns, and then you have potential problems with the mandate repeal. I just think they need to come closer to what the House passed, because their bill is really too problematic to pass right now.
Well, I think the mandate repeal takes care of a lot of the deficit concerns that were there, but you're right. At what cost does this happen? And this is such a narrow majority for the Senate, and there are such fickle senators in play here. I don't think you can count on John McCain to vote for this tax reform or tax cut. He didn't even support the Bush tax cuts back in 2001 and 2003. And so if you're doing this individual mandate push, which actually I think has some real savviness to it, not just in this bill, but in future bills, you're losing Democrats, and you might not be shoring up all of your Republican base. So this might be one of the things that we see going. But kudos to Paul Ryan. Again, we hear a lot of complaints about nothing getting done. This is his third difficult piece of legislation passed, and those Republicans, that's actually a fewer number of Republicans than pulled away from his budget framework, which was sort of a precursor to this bill. So he at least he can get credit for some of what he's done.
Well, the individual mandate thing is clever, and I think Republicans, when they first thought, well, wait a minute, it's a tax. The Supreme Court told us it was a tax. We didn't agree with them, but if that's what it is, we can use this tax bill to change it. So it does seem to be a little bit of a poison pill for the bill. So I would actually probably see it not ending up in the bill. One other reason to hurry is we could, by December 12th, be looking at a Democratic senator elected in Alabama. And if you think it's hard to pass something with 52 Republicans, try it with 51 in the Senate.
There's some question about timing of seating that senator and obviously what's going to happen, but we will see when we come back. Speaker Ryan and his postcard.